Alright, picture this. You've just accepted your offer to the University of Toronto and are about to head into your first year, but you're really confused and unsure of what you should know. Sound like you? Keep watching. Now, if that statement sort of represents you, don't worry, you are definitely not alone. I remember finishing high school and being so excited for what was to come, yet also terrified at the idea that I was going to university and I had no idea what to expect. I felt so uninformed and was really worried that I was going to miss out or make mistakes that were going to affect me in the future, or that I was going to regret. If you don't know me yet, my name is Maya and I'm about to head into my second year at the University of Toronto St. George campus, specializing in psychology. My goal with this video is to provide you with the information I wish I was given back when I was starting my first year this early on. So before I actually go into the rest of this video, I want to say 3 things. First of all, anything that I say in this video, the advice I give you and whatnot, is just based off of my experience. One of very many that exist. So whenever you take into account anything I say into your own lives, I just want you to remember that you might not live the same thing I did. So keep that in mind. Second, as you may have already noticed, I've split up this video into different sections just to make your life a little easier when watching. So if ever you want to skip ahead or, go back to a section, you can do so with ease. And finally, please consider liking and subscribing, as it will help me create more valuable content like this in the future. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So each course at the U of T St. George campus are either worth 0.5 credits or 1.0 credits. The courses that are worth 0.5 credits are typically the ones that last for a semester, and they have a course code that end in either a F or an S. F being for the fall semester and S being for the winter semester. Now, the courses that have a credit worth 1.0 are the ones that last typically for a full year, meaning both the fall and the winter semester. These courses have course codes that end in a Y. As a first-year student in the Faculty of Arts and Science, you are not yet enrolled in a program. You are just in a admissions category. Now, this does have both its pros and cons, with the pros being that because you're not in a program yet, you still have the chance to explore different areas of study, and then the cons being that because you're not in a program, you have to work maybe twice as hard in order to get the grades and meet the requirements for the programs that you want and actually be able to continue your studies at U of T. And this is exactly where course selection and course enrollment come into play. So from my knowledge, and this is something I've heard from others, first-year students are typically the last students to get to enroll in courses. And the reason for this is because the university does want to give those graduating sooner a higher chance of getting the courses they need to actually be able to complete their degrees. While talking with other people, I've heard that not everyone has the same enrollment time, which does make sense if you come to think about it, because they just don't want ACORN to crash and no one's able to enroll into anything. But it does mean that it's a game of luck at that point, because someone else might have an earlier time than you and get to enroll in classes earlier, which means that you might not have the spots that you wanted in a certain class that have very limited spots, which I will talk about more later. Now, this actually leads me to my next point, which is that unless you're taking really big courses like Psych 100 or Soc 100, it is really unlikely that you'll get all the courses that you had initially intended on getting. And this is why I cannot stress enough the importance of having backup timetables ready, just in case that the courses that you wanted are already full, which does happen. In my experience, I unfortunately did not prepare enough, and I did not expect all the courses that I had wanted to be full by the time it got to my enrollment time, and you can imagine how disappointed I was. So please don't make the same mistake I did, and always have more backup courses than you think you will need. So you might remember that when you applied to an admissions category, and this is exactly where that comes into play. Your admissions category will give you priority on enrolling in certain courses during the priority enrollment period, which happens before the general enrollment period. So for instance, if you are in life sciences, you will have priority over courses such as bio and chemistry, whereas those in humanities won't really have access to those courses until the general enrollment period. So if you're curious as to the courses I took in my first year, in the fall semester I took Psych 100, Soc 100, EAS 193, and I took Wordsworth 199. And then in the winter semester I took POL 109, PHS 100, Psych 220, and Soc 150. I know right now it may seem really difficult to retain all these course codes, but I promise you it will get easier as soon as you start. People always refer to, or in most cases refer to courses by their course codes, so I promise you it will just get easier as soon as you start. Now, typically students take 5 courses per semester, and I believe this is actually what's recommended by the university. And you might have noticed I only took 4 courses per semester, and you might be wondering, why did you do that? Well, the answer is I have transfer credits from doing IB in high school that came onto my academic transcript for U of T as university courses, meaning I could take a reduced course load and still be on track to graduate at the same time as everyone else. I honestly think this is one of the best decisions I've made in my first year because it just made my life so much more manageable. And you might not think that you'll need the extra flexibility right now, but trust me, anything can happen in first year. Life will throw things at you and things might get hard to manage. And so I just think it can't hurt to have 1 course less per semester if you have transfer credits, which you can get from IB and AP, I believe. U of T has a whole page that talks about transfer credits, which I will leave in the description below, but it can never hurt, right? And actually, I think it benefited me because it was a lot easier for me to maintain higher grades, which I needed to get into the limited programs that I wanted to get into, which I will discuss later on too. If you did do IB or AP and you've met the requirements that the University of Toronto has in order to be eligible for transfer credits, you can find them under your full academic history on ACORN. So another thing that you need to consider as an arts and science student at U of T is that you have to meet the breadth requirements in order to graduate. Now, what are breadth requirements? So if you didn't know, breadth requirements are set by the university to ensure that all students, by the time they graduate, have had the chance of exploring different courses in a variety of subject areas and disciplines. All courses at U of T have been assigned a breadth category, which you can find in the timetable builder under the description of each course. So there are 5 different breadth categories, which I will put somewhere up here. And in order to meet the requirements, you have 2 options. So the first option is that you can take 1.0 credit in each of 4 of the 5 breadth categories. Or you can take 1.0 credits in each of the 3 of the 5 categories, and then 0.5 in the remaining 2 categories. Now, a lot of students tend to get their breadth requirements done in their first year just so they don't have to worry about it later on. And while I do suggest this, keep in mind that it's not necessary. You just have to complete the requirements by the time you graduate. If you want to know more about the breadth requirements, I also left a link in the description on that. So the last thing you need to consider when selecting your courses are the programs and the requirements. Although you're not in a program yet, you do need to have some idea of what programs you might potentially want to go into. And the reason for this is because at the end of your first year is when you need to start applying for programs in order to be able to stay within the university. Now, while some programs are open enrollment, meaning that if you enroll, you automatically get accepted, there are many programs that are limited enrollment, meaning that even if you apply, you have a chance of not getting accepted if you don't meet the criteria or the requirements. For instance, in my case, I did apply to many programs. The one I wanted was the psychology specialist. And in order to be accepted into the specialist, they say that the cutoff or the grade cutoff is an 80%. However, even though it is an 80%, generally speaking, the pool of applicants is so high, especially in psychology, that the grade cutoff is actually higher than that. So I would say if you want to go for a psych specialist, go for an 83 because that's around where the grade cutoff actually is. But again, it always depends on the pool of applicants and your year, basically. Alright, so now comes the part where I give you my tips and tricks and my advice for course enrollments, programs, and whatnot. So as I mentioned earlier, please make use of the timetable builder and make mock timetables so that you have plans on deck in case things don't go the way you had initially planned when your enrollment time comes around. Second, put all the courses that you want in your enrollment cart on ACORN. This will make your life so much easier when your enrollment time comes around, because all you have to do is click on enroll, instead of having to actually search up all the courses one by one and potentially risking your spot. Now, you do want to do this a couple days ahead of your enrollment time, because 24 hours before your enrollment date, you won't have access to ACORN. The page is not available to any student, and I guess this is maybe because the university is preparing for the load of people who are going to be using the platform. But yes, don't do this at the last minute. Please plan ahead. So the third thing I want you to consider is taking seminar style classes. And what I mean by this is that U of T offers a range of classes that are only available to first year students. And this is really beneficial for many reasons. So not only are these classes more intimate, meaning that I believe they're capped at around 25 students, which is really beneficial because you get to actually interact with your peers who are fellow first year students that you can meet and becomes friends with. But there are also classes that have really interesting content. And what I mean by this is that I remember I was reading through the timetable builder, and I read there was a course on astrophysics or something of the sort, but that was made for students who only knew grade 10 algebra. So this means that not only can you get your breadth requirements done this way, but it's also really easy because they're aimed at students who are not necessarily going into science or math or, so I think they're really beneficial for these reasons. But the final reason I want to give you is that these can really help boost your GPA. At least in my case, that's what happened. Some of my highest grades are from those courses. All right, so the next thing that I suggest is, if possible, avoid taking the really early morning classes or the really late evening classes. I might not be the first person to tell you this, and you might think that right now you're capable of getting early every single morning because you've been doing it for high school for years on end. But trust me when I say that I went from being at school at 8 a.m. every single morning in high school to struggling getting up at 9 a.m. There are a few reasons why I suggest avoiding the early or late evening classes. The first reason is that you might decide to take extracurriculars, which I highly recommend, by the way. And these might take place either really early in the morning or later in the evening. And if you have a class that happens at the same time as that because you decided to take a late evening class, then that's a bit disappointing, right? Last semester, I took a course that happened once a week from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. It was my only later in the evening class, and it was in the OISE auditorium. And if you don't know, the OISE auditorium has very dim lights, which made it really hard to stay awake, especially during those hours that the class was taking place. So that's just another reason why you might want to avoid it. Even though you think, oh, it's not that late, it'll be hard to stay awake because you'll be tired from the entire day. And speaking of extracurriculars, last year I decided to join the varsity cheerleading team, and the practices ended really late at night, like around 10-11 p.m., which meant that I had to get home after that, shower, eat, whatever, and then I wasn't in bed till maybe midnight, 1 a.m. And then if I had taken early morning classes, I would have had to get up really early and then get to campus for that 9 a.m. lecture, tutorial, whatever it was. And it's possible, but it's not as realistic in my head because I feel like I would have just burnt out in the long run. Another reason why you might want to avoid those late night classes is because, especially if it's on a Friday night, you might want to go out with your friends or do anything else but be in a lecture hall or a tutorial classroom. So just in general, I feel like it's a good idea to avoid the early or late evening classes if possible. All right, this next tip is for all my commuters. If possible, try condensing your classes into a few days. And by this, I don't mean cram all your classes into 2 days, because that will not be helpful. You'll just be really exhausted. But what I mean by this is you are not going to want to go to campus every single day. The first semester of my first year, I had a single class every single day of the week. And that was really annoying because that meant I had to go to campus every single day of the week just for 2 hours or 3 hours. And the second semester, I learned from my mistake and I had one day off, and that was really, really, really helpful. Sometimes this is not possible, but if you can, try getting the Monday or Friday off so that you could have a 3 or 4 day long weekend every week, basically. But another reason why this might be beneficial is because sometimes the holidays happen, or most of the times, the holidays happen on a Monday or a Friday. And when there are holidays, it doesn't just mean that the class disappears. It just means that the lecture that you were supposed to have that day, or the tutorial, will happen at the end of the semester on the catch-up day, basically. So if you don't have a class on a Monday or Friday, you don't have any catch-up to do. Next up, we have the waitlist for the courses. So even if a course is full, you can still put yourself on the waitlist, and once you do so, it'll show you your place or your number in that waitlist. The lower the number, the better, because it means you have a higher chance of getting into the course. So from experience, the waitlists typically close around 1 to 2 weeks after the courses have begun, and people can drop courses for all sorts of reasons. It may be because the person didn't like the course after the first lecture, or because it was just a backup, but whatever the reason may be, I think it's always a good idea to put yourself on the waitlist if you really want to take the course, because you never know what could happen. Just remember that when you put yourself on the waitlist for a course, it does count as a course credit, and that the max course load you can take per semester is 3.0, or 6 times 0.5 credits, which means that if you're already enrolled in 5 0.5 courses, that means it's 2.5 credits, you can only put yourself on the waitlist for a 0.5 credit course. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is considering both the professor and the syllabus. Basically, you'll find that for many courses, there are different sections that are taught by different professors. So I like to do a bit of research on the professors before deciding on whether or not I'd like to take their course. I like to go on either Reddit or on Rate My Prof and read the comments that people have left on the courses and the professors. But I will say that you should always take these comments with a grain of salt, just because I've noticed that many times they can be a little harsh. Nonetheless, these comments can be very informative. For instance, I really like the type of comments that say stuff like, Professor X is really, really good at teaching and is a very engaging professor, but their testing is a little bit on the more difficult side. Or you might have some comments that will give you suggestions on how you can do well in the course. For example, I also really like the comments that say, the professor really, really puts a lot of emphasis on reading, and so you need to do the readings in order to do well on the exams. I like to use these comments to help me decide which professor might align best with my interests, and hopefully it'll do the same for you. Alright, so the final tip I'm going to give you is that as soon as you have all your syllabi, I want you to take all the due dates, all the tests, all the quizzes, all the assignments, and put them in your calendar in one place. This will make your life 10,000 times easier, because you won't be stressing and trying to remember when everything is due, because you'll already have it in your calendar. I also like to put myself reminders for assignments when they're due and like a few days ahead, so just to give myself a bit of buffer time. But this has helped me so much, because I'm not thinking about, oh my god, am I missing an assignment? Oh my god, am I going to go beyond the due date? So I think it's a really good idea to just put it in one place. Some people like to use Google Calendar. I like to use Notion, and I'll show you in just a second how I did mine, because I like to also put like the class or the course code, and then also what the assignment weighs in terms of percentage. So just things like that you can keep in mind. Alright, so now we're moving on to the last section of this video, which is the opportunities and resources available to you at U of T. The first opportunity I'd like to talk to you about are the first-year learning communities, also known as FLICs. So FLICs are essentially a small group of selected first-year students who will meet either weekly or every other week and learn really important tips, tricks, advice, skills, and resources from their peer mentors and the faculty and staff advisors. There are 8 different first-year learning communities available, and they're all focused on different areas of study. For example, there's a life science FLIC, there is a psychology FLIC, a Ramen Commerce FLIC, a Comp Sci, etc. And these are all available to you for free by the Faculty of Arts and Science. In my first year, I did, you guessed it, the psychology FLIC, because that's primarily what I wanted to focus on later on in my studies. And I personally really enjoyed the experience, and there's a few reasons for this. The first thing I really enjoyed from the FLIC was that the information that was given to us was always very helpful and valuable, and we were always given really good advice. A second thing I really enjoyed is that being part of a FLIC meant that you would automatically be enrolled into one of the specific courses for the FLIC. So for psychology, we were automatically enrolled into the Psych 100 course for the fall. This was particularly helpful because it meant I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was going to get into the course, which I definitely needed in order to be able to apply to the psychology program. Third is the resources. In your FLICs, you will go over a bunch of resources that are available to you as a U of T student, and the peer mentors will walk you through exactly how to find these resources. And you can ask as many questions as you want, and the peer mentors are trained to answer your questions. And lastly is the snacks. So because each FLIC has their own budget, typically the peer mentors would bring snacks and refreshments to each of the meetings. The only downside for me personally was that the FLICs have a set date and time. So for the psychology FLIC, it occurred every other week on Thursdays from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. But because of that, I couldn't enroll into a course that was happening at the same time. Although that was a bit annoying, I do think that the pros outweigh the cons. And so if you are interested in participating in a FLIC, I highly suggest you do it. You do have to apply to be considered for a FLIC, but the application process is really easy. So you don't have to worry about writing a really long essay or anything like that. The deadline to apply for a FLIC is July 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so if this is something you're interested in, definitely go check out the link in the description. Next up are the libraries at U of T. As a U of T student, you have access to all 40 of the libraries plus the online resources. Now, you might not care about the online resources right now, but just imagine this for a second. Imagine you have an assignment that requires you going through research papers. So you browse the internet and you stumble upon a research paper, but the website asks you to pay to read it. Well, instead of giving up on that paper, or even worse, paying to access the paper, which by the way, you should never really do, what you can do instead is go onto the U of T Library's website, log into your U of T account, copy paste the title of the paper into the search bar, and in most cases, you can actually find the same paper in the database. While you have that open, in most cases, you can actually find the reference list text cited at the bottom, which you can just copy paste into your reference list. Obviously, you should check to make sure that it's accurate, but in my experience, most of the time it is. Speaking of the U of T Library's website, you can also book study rooms on there. These are great, especially if you have a group project or if you just want an independent study session. Next up, we have the TCard. You actually need your TCard in order to access many online services and quite a few facilities at U of T. So the gyms like the Gold Ring or the Athletic Center, a few libraries and buildings like Gerstein, Robarts, or the Robarts Commons. You also need a TCard if you have a meal plan. So if you're in residence and you have a mandatory meal plan, that is what you need to use in order to pay for your meal every time. You can also use your TCard for the T-Bucks, which you can use towards either food or printing services, etc. I highly suggest that you book your appointment to get your TCard as soon as you can, because it will get hectic as soon as courses start. Last year, I got my TCard in around May, I think, and I'm really happy I did it then, because when I was talking to the staff member, they were telling me that usually people wait until the last minute, and that's when it gets really crowded and the time slots are almost all taken up. So if you're in Toronto or the greater Toronto area right now and you've already committed to U of T, book that appointment, don't wait. One of the final things I want to talk about is making use of your college's resources, such as the academic advice, academic help, writing centers, etc. Being as confused as I was last year, I decided to book an appointment with an academic advisor at my college. And this is honestly one of the best decisions I made, because it was so helpful to have someone go through everything with you and an expert who can guide you through the whole process. Make use of your college's writing center too. So this is a center that can help you with any of your assignments. So for example, they can help you brainstorm ideas, or they can help you go through your essay or your assignment and give you suggestions on how you can improve it. A lot of students don't make use of this, but I find it really helpful. I used it for one of my assignments last year, and I think thanks to that, it helped boost my grade just a little bit. As a U of T student, you also have access to CLNx, or the Career and Co-Curricular Learning Network. On this website, as soon as you log in, you can find a job searching catalog. You can find appointments if you need help with interview prep or if you want someone to review your resume and cover letter. So you can just go browse there, and they have a bunch of services that are free and available to you. You should definitely make use of it. Last year, I used it for many different reasons. One of the reasons was I wanted to see what kind of job postings there were. I also used it to apply to ROPs, which is the Research Opportunity Program. And then I also used the appointments, so the interview practice and the cover letter and resume review. So you should really just go and look at it and see what kind of services you may benefit from. ROPs are a great way that you can start your research experience and actually get hands-on experience by working with a professor on their research. I applied to 5 last year and I got 2 interviews, and then I did get both positions, but I had to choose one. If you want to know more about ROPs, I'm going to put the link to the website in the description, but because I haven't done my ROP yet, I can't really speak from experience, so maybe I'll leave that for next year. With that, we are now at the summary section, so I'm just going to go over what you should take away from this video, the main key points, and whatnot. 1. Start planning your courses as soon as possible and make mock timetables. If there are courses with multiple sections, do research on the professors and try to find the syllabuses if you can to see which section works best for you. Review the programs you're interested in and the requirements so that you can best curate your course list. Consider taking courses restricted to first years because they're really interesting and they can help boost your GPA. Avoid taking really early morning classes or really late evening classes. If possible, try to leave one day of the week where you don't have any classes. This will make your life so much better. Add the courses you want to take to your enrollment cart at least 24 hours before your enrollment date. Start considering your breadth requirements as you will need them to graduate. Go apply to a first-year learning community if it's something you're interested in. Book your appointment to get your TCard as soon as you can. Do not wait. When you get all your syllabuses, add all the assignments, due dates, quizzes, tests, etc. into your calendar so that you don't have to worry about losing or remembering anything. And lastly, don't forget to have fun. It's your first year of university. Talk to people, make friends. The more friends you make, the better it will be because you'll probably see those people again somewhere in your life, in other courses or in the street when you're walking outside. It's just a great way. And yeah. That concludes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're going to university or starting out university in the fall, good luck to you. I promise you, you will have a lot of fun, even though it might feel very stressful right now. And savor it while you can because it flies by so quickly. So again, thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in next week's video.